Hello there, welcome to my review of the Rockford Files, Season 3, Episode 7, So Help Me God, written by Juanita Bartlett and directed by Gino Schwark. The episode begins at Jim's trailer, where Jim has had a successful day's fishing and Rocky hasn't.
Well, I don't never catch no fish at the point.
Yeah, but I do.
It's not long before the tranquility is broken with the delivery of a subpoena.
What's this all about, pal?
I don't read them, Mr. Rockford. I just deliver them.
Which Jim immediately takes to Beth.
To appear in the United States District Court at 3:00 p.m. to testify before the grand jury.
He's been summoned to a grand jury, but as they aren't required to tell him why, he's clueless as to what he is supposed to have witnessed. While Jim and Beth are concerned and unable to act, Rocky is far more trusting in the US government.
This is Uncle Sam wants to ask these questions.
Why do you think I'm worried, Rocky?
This is a clear demonstration of the generational difference between someone who grew up pre-Vietnam and pre-Watergate and two people who lived through both. At the hearing, Beth tries to advise Jim to say nothing beyond his name and ask her for guidance when he needs it, as she cannot be in the room with him. Unfortunately, because Jim is late, he barely hears most of this advice, and so does his best to be honest with prosecutor Gary Bevins.
You have no idea why you've been called here today?
No.
Played by a returning William Daniels.
If I were to tell you that you've been called to testify regarding your relationship with Mr. Frank Sorvino, would that surprise you? Which
is a mistake, as it appears Jim has been implicated in the disappearance of union boss Frank Sorvino. Jim claims not to know Sorvino beyond what he's read in the newspapers, but Sorvino's secretary's log says he spoke to Sorvino on 2 occasions. Bevins makes several accusations about Jim aiding Sorvino's flight from justice. Jim attempts to plead the fifth, invoking his right not to self-incriminate, before being told he unknowingly waived that right.
You have waived your rights, Mr. Rockford.
No, I haven't.
My knowledge of the US legal system is limited to what I've picked up from TV and film, so I could have easily been lost amongst all this technical stuff. Which is why it's ingenious of the writers to not only have Jim in the same position as the audience, but also allow him to explain what he does know via Beth, who can then correct him when he's got it wrong. We are of course on Jim's side, as this is the Rockford Files, not the Gary Bevin Files. So it's important that we sympathise straight away with Jim, and this is achieved quite easily by having Bevins be so aggressive and short-tempered with Jim from the off. I should also mention that we don't have this grand jury system in the UK, but from what I understand it's sort of a pre-trial trial that decides whether certain cases end up in court or not. On its face, not a bad thing, but you can already see where it might be open to abuse, as we find out from Beth that Bevins is angling for a Supreme Court position, and that Jim's experience is limited to actual jury trials. So he's baffled how this has the appearance of a court, but without a judge or defence lawyer. Held in civil contempt for refusing to testify, Jim finds out that he can be held for 9 months, only to have to go through the same process again and again until he agrees to answer, allowed to be legally held indefinitely. Luckily, Beth manages to get Jim out because they had Jim's name wrong on the subpoena, but this is certain to be temporary as another subpoena will be issued, and this time they won't get it wrong. This does give Jim just enough time to do some investigation of his own, though. A side effect of this rotten treatment is that Rocky has quickly lost faith in Uncle Sam, which demonstrates his own naivety.
Well, I hate to say this, Sonny, but I don't trust them guys.
Neither do I.
After tracking down Sorvino's secretary, Jim finds out that she never actually witnessed Rockford speaking with Sorvino, and just assumed they spoke, something which one of Sorvino's union associates doesn't believe, causing Jim to run to one of the few people he can trust, Angel, who is trying to dig out a photo of Sorvino, but only manages to get Jim served again.
Nice seeing you again, Mr. Rockford.
Back at his trailer, Jim finds it's been ransacked and his records are missing. Henshaw, the Union goon, turns up to try and threaten Jim, only to be thwarted by having Dennis there.
Sergeant Dennis Becker, LAPD.
Didn't know you had company.
Just exactly what was it you wanted to talk to me about?
It can wait. Wouldn't want to intrude.
Causing them to turn heel very quickly in one of the few moments of levity in this episode so far, but letting Jim know that they weren't the ones who tossed his place. At the newly convened grand jury, Jim now only pleads the fifth until he's allowed to make a statement, an impassioned speech that Garner gives just the right amount of righteous indignation to, but one that nonetheless lands him back in jail for contempt. He has a visit from Angel, who finally has a good photo of Sorvino, but he's still Angel.
You talked about $20. Do I look like I got $20 on me? Hey, Jimmy, that was the deal. I'm warning you.
This is a fantastic moment of levity in this very serious episode, with a really great punchline.
$30. And I'm telling you, Angel, that's tops. $30 tops.
$50 seemed a little high.
$50.
Finally seeing the photo, Jim recognises Sorvino, but by another name, having done some work for him after he was supposedly kidnapped. Sorvino hired Jim to make sure the goons who faked his kidnapping had left town as agreed. With all his ducks in a row, Jim is ready to now testify to exactly everything he knows, but Bevins wants to make him sweat in jail for a little longer.
He'll testify when I'm damn good and ready.
Seeing this as very inconvenient to his career prospects, which leads to Jim nearly getting shivved in the exercise yard by someone who wants Jim silenced, only for a successful stabbing to occur the next day. Jim obviously survives. The show did go on for a little while longer, but Rocky is now completely disillusioned by the American dream. In the hospital, Dennis lets Jim know that it was actually Sorvino who wanted Jim silenced to tie up some loose ends. The Union and the grand jury wanted Sorvino for skimming $500,000 from the Union fund, and with Sorvino now caught, Jim is completely in the clear, but still has to testify to the grand jury, which is exactly what he wants. He's now able to give a full account of his treatment at the hands of Gary Bevins, and Bevins' abuse of the legal system, the righteous indignation giving way to righteous anger.
I want an apology.
The grand jury has no apology to make.
I wasn't referring to the grand jury, Mr. Bevins.
Beautifully using Bevins' previous words against him.
There is no such thing as a small injustice, that if even one citizen is so deprived, make no mistake, we all suffer. You don't remember the words, do you, Mr. Bevins? Because they're your words.
Putting the final nail in any political aspirations Bevins might have had. We're given a final coda explaining that everything dramatised was as it is in law, and I can't speak to as whether this has changed or not, but I do hope it has, as it seems a little too easy for an unscrupulous, ambitious lawyer to abuse. In general, I avoid talking politics in my reviews unless it's relevant to the plot, and here it most certainly is. If anyone needed proof that it's not just modern media that is political, here it is. An episode based around and directly tackling a political issue of the day. We've seen the Rockford Files take on political issues before, although never so head-on and never so explicitly. so I think it warrants further examination. This particular loophole that circumvents the Constitution is probably not the only one that exists, and here they are able to shine a light on this particular one without it ever feeling like that's all the episode is about, weaving in a little mystery to the story too. However, we see through Rocky's collapse in faith of the legal system and the government that when you do shine a light on these issues, people's opinions can and do change. Yes, Jim could have not been jailed if he had just told them what he knew, and then challenged it in actual court. But firstly, he shouldn't have to do that. Secondly, not everyone has a lawyer like Beth as a friend to help them out when it gets that far. And who knows what trouble they might be in by then, having conspiracy charges levied against them. And finally, in the real world, not everyone is a smart, cunning private eye who can look into their own case. These legal loopholes, like Bevan's leaving Jim in jail to get stabbed because he felt like it, really do exist. And they really do have serious real-world consequences that happen to this day. So it was incredibly brave of a relatively light TV detective show to focus on this particular issue in the mid-70s. This is easily a 5 out of 5 for me, for bringing this issue to public attention in an entertaining way without neglecting good storytelling. Thank you. Goodbye.